I call the honourable member Andrew Williams.
Thank you very much.
Morning, Mr Williams.
Good morning, Mr Speaker. Thank you very much. I take a brief call on behalf of New Zealand First in the non-bank deposit takers bill. And for those out there listening to this or watching this, just a reminder as to what the actual bill does. The bill seeks to implement the final components of a new regulatory regime for non-bank deposit takers. So these are deposit takers in the finance industry who are not banks. It would incorporate the prudential requirements already imposed under Part 5D of the Reserve Bank of New Zealand Act 1989 and introduce new measures covering the licensing of non-bank deposit takers, suitability assessments for directors and senior officers, restrictions on changes of ownership and new powers for the Reserve Bank to detect and manage instances of distress or failure of those non-bank deposit takers. So, Mr Speaker, essentially what this does is tighten up the areas outside of the main banking stream and bring in a lot more controls via the Reserve Bank so that we will not have a repeat of perhaps some of the cowboy activities that have occurred in the past in some of our financial, or what you would say, fringe financial institutions. And in looking at the bill, it's under Part 2, Clause 13, determining applications for a licence. The bank must not grant a licence to an applicant unless the bank is satisfied that the applicant is, if licensed, would be able to comply on an ongoing basis with this Act, the regulations and the proposed conditions. The bank has received a suitably notice for each director and senior officer or proposed director and senior officer of the proposed of the bank. Now, that's most important because what it basically says is, at last, there will be full applications required to the Reserve Bank for these various entities, and they also will have to justify who the directors are and who's controlling these entities. And in terms of the appointment of the directors, if a licensed non-bank deposit taker is a company, building society or overseas company, the governing body of that NBDT must include at least 2 independent directors, and the chairperson of the governing body of the NBDT must not be an employee of either the licensed NBDT or a related party. And an independent director means that it cannot be an employee of either the NBDT or a related party. The independent directors cannot be have more than 10% of the voting securities of the NBDT or related parties, and therefore are truly, in a sense, independent and able to provide independent advice to that entity, where in the past perhaps these lines have been a bit blurred, and employees have acted in this role, senior management acted in this role in some cases, and often, as we've seen in the case of South Canterbury Finance and other such institutions, there have been instances where governance and management and other things have overlapped. It's also interesting in terms of credit ratings that a licensed NBDT must have a current rating of its creditworthiness, or if required by regulations made in Section 23, the creditworthiness of its borrowing group. And again, that will be of great comfort to investors. The mum and dads of New Zealand perhaps are putting money into such financial institution, that they must have a current current rating and creditworthiness to substantiate what they are doing in terms of taking the deposits. Mr Speaker, this is a further bill today, following on from the covered bonds bill that we've just had before, following on from other financial ones last evening. It's a tranche of various bills aimed at tightening up the financial markets in New Zealand. This is another one that New Zealand First supports because we believe there were some glaring anomalies in our financial legislation that was allowing less than satisfactory business transactions to take part, and indeed putting New Zealanders at risk in the case of their investments. This is another way of tightening that up and giving more surety to the financial markets, making New Zealand a much safer place to invest money and making it a far tidier situation for the New Zealand economy. So New Zealand First will support the bill.
I call the honourable member, Dr.